So if people have been listening to the show, they know that we, and particularly I, am interested in Bitcoin-based charitable work and nonprofit organizations. One of the organizations that people have probably heard of, it's becoming really well known in the Bitcoin community, is Sean's Outpost, which is an advocacy organization for homeless people. It is run by Jason King in Pensacola, Florida. You know, they've had some real issues, kind of like a Habitat for Humanity, where they're building homes. They're also providing food against the local laws because it's illegal actually to distribute any kind of food in like a park or in the city where they're doing this. And they do all kinds of projects like that. But recently, he's really taken it up a notch with this project called Satoshi Forest, where basically Jason has rented a plot of land with Bitcoins and has basically people who would otherwise be homeless camping on this land. And now it is private property. So they don't have to face these laws, which basically make it illegal to be homeless in the city. And it's really fascinating. I wonder where this is going to go. He's got a lot of people, I think, camping on this land so far. So have you guys heard about this? What do you think?
He's actually not renting it. They actually bought the property, and the payment, I think it's $600 US a month that they're doing, is actually a mortgage payment. The interesting part about this, of course, is that the company that the land has been purchased from is actually a multi-state real estate company. Sean's Outpost isn't accepting Bitcoin, then converting it to dollars and then paying the mortgage with it. They're actually paying in Bitcoin for the mortgage. And as a result of that interaction that Jason King had with them, they're actually accepting Bitcoin for all of their properties in a couple of different states. So that's really exciting too. All of these things are like on their face. If you just look at just what's happened, then maybe it's not that important. I mean, this is really cool, and it's really been interesting to watch Jason progress in the Bitcoin community, certainly, and his cause gain name recognition as it has, because like when you go on Reddit and there's a post that's been made by Sean's Outpost, chances are really good it's not only going to be getting a lot of upvotes, in addition to that, they're getting a lot of donations through the Bitcoin tip system that's built into Reddit now. It's really cool watching this stuff, and again, you can see how even though this is a project that he did for a specific reason, it's already having knock-on effects elsewhere where people, I mean, it's really cool to see. I'm excited about this one.
Their very first mortgage payment was paid entirely from tips that came through the Reddit bot, all $600. That's very exciting. I think what they're doing at Sean's Outpost, what Jason's doing, is spectacular. It's inspiring. We need to create an award just for this kind of thing, really contributing the most to the Bitcoin community and give them some recognition, because this is really impressive.
Yeah, so what kind of effects do you think this is going to have on, I don't know, real estate and like projects that people can do? Like if you could buy land from a multi-state real estate company and use Bitcoins to do that, what possibilities does that open up?
I think that one of the main ones that jumped out at me about this is that they didn't buy land with Bitcoin. They're paying a mortgage with Bitcoin. So what we've seen so far is we've seen people asking for fixed rates payable in Bitcoin. And that's kind of a scary thing to do. If you're going to spend, $100,000 right now worth of Bitcoin, then that means that you've spent all of that upfront, and it's like a problem. But for a deflationary currency, it makes a ton of sense to pay your mortgage in it when the amount is not denominated in it, because that means that over time, the amount of Bitcoin, relatively speaking, that they'll have to pay, assuming that the price goes up because adoption continues at the pace that we've sort of seen, that amount, relatively speaking, goes down. So they see a savings if they have the Bitcoins in advance.
Right. So they could be paying 1 Bitcoin for their mortgage payment, years on into the future. And that would be great for an organization like Sean's Outpost, who's a charity, and they're basically trying to save and have this long-term vision.
Especially when you factor endowments into this, that's the real, Stephanie, you run Free Aid, and I mean, you guys wind up with more Bitcoin than you need to spend on operation right then. And so it's in your best interest with a deflationary currency to basically just hold on to it, because you know that since you don't need it now, and it's probably going to go up in price, relatively speaking, you'll be able to use it for more later. So, I mean, it really incentivizes spending what you need when you need it. And Bitcoin's very good for that, but it also incentivizes not spending more than you need, because the advantage of holding on to it means you'll have more resources to work with later.
There are several organizations right now who are trying to build up Bitcoin endowments, basically so that they'll be able to use interest on those to do future kinds of charitable work, including the Lifeboat Foundation, which is kind of like a think tank for progression of humankind. They have like a Bitcoin wing also, It's interesting. And then also BitGive, which is a project that's associated with BitPay, and they're trying to build up like a big Bitcoin endowment so that they can use it in the future to do Bitcoin charitable work.
I think that the idea of an award is a really, really good one, and definitely something that we should think about how we want to do, because this is, a big part of what we're trying to do with Let's Talk Bitcoin is, of course, do this whole shining examples, horrible warnings thing. And we talk about horrible warnings way more than we talk about shining examples, because it seems like so many companies just figuring it out. And so they're making all of these really basic mistakes, like, for example, not communicating so people assume the worst. This is like a really basic marketing 101 thing. The worst thing to do under most circumstances is to stop talking to people when they're thinking that you're doing something wrong. That further reinforces the point.
I've done these for years as part of my analyst work. And we had, nice events, nice hotel, buffets, cocktails, announcement speeches, opening envelopes, and handing crystal awards to various people. The trick, I think, to make it good is to do it for individuals and not companies, to recognize individuals, not companies. Companies become sponsorship, whereas with individuals, you can do it more comfortably.
And I think that in Bitcoin, that makes it all the sense in the world. Again, it's a person-to-person environment, so this makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Well, that's great. Let's develop that more off the air.
More than 300,000 users and counting trust blockchain.info. It's a Bitcoin wallet service and a wealth of Bitcoin information, and it's completely free to use. With a blockchain.info wallet, you'll get the convenience of a web wallet and the security of a desktop client. Blockchain.info is also a block explorer. You can use it to see Bitcoin transactions in real time, check the balance of any Bitcoin address, and view many handy Bitcoin charts, all for free. See what they have to offer today at blockchain.info. Hi, Stephanie here. Would you like to turn your book into an enthralling audiobook? Need a persuasive commercial to promote your company? How about a narrator for your explainer video? Here's where I can help. I'm a freelance voiceover artist, and since 2009, I've lent my voice to dozens of audio projects. To hear some examples of my work, check out my website, smvoice.info. If you like what you hear, I'd love to be the voice of your next project. Get in touch at smvoice.info.
We first saw Bitcoin ATMs, or Bitcoin vending machines, as some of the manufacturers like to call them, at the Bitcoin 2013 conference in San Jose this past May. Now in September, the first couple of those have started to release. First the Lamasu vending machine, and then also the RoboCoin Bitcoin ATM, which is, they actually call theirs an ATM, whereas Lamasu prefers to talk about it as a vending machine. These are looking like they're going to get some traction, but they're moving into a really uncertain legal environment. And so, do you think that in the US or in other places around the world, this is the start of the accessible Bitcoin buying experience? Or is this just more technology that if we could just use it as technology, then it'd be great, but because there are rules that need to be followed, it's less useful?
Well, the uncertain regulatory environment is precisely the reason why a lot of these companies, Lamasu in particular, like to refer to themselves as a Bitcoin vending machine. If they were to make it a place where you could exchange Bitcoin and fiat kind of both ways, they would be subject to a lot of these laws that govern ATMs, and they don't want to do that. And so they just make it a one-way machine, and now it's a Bitcoin vending machine. And, I think that's probably a smart move, because there were a few people who literally tried to make Bitcoin ATMs. They were clunky. There were security issues. It has to be very large and difficult to walk away with. And also there's the regulatory stuff that really slows people down. So it kind of makes sense to have just a one-way thing where you can buy Bitcoins and it's at like a bar or something where somebody can keep an eye on it. I think it's exciting. And if it's not allowed in the US, it'll flourish in other places.
That's the key. There's 192 countries out there, and if it's not allowed in the US, who cares? Listen, this is a device that could easily be exported and be used. I expect to see these pop up in places like Germany and Berlin and Bratislava and other places in Europe where Bitcoin is more comfortably regulated, and then also in places around the world outside of Europe. The key here, I think, is to realize that you're not really going to make a ton of money from fees or by having this machine in your premises. You're going to make money from foot traffic. So if this attracts customers to your business that wouldn't otherwise come, I think that's some great advertising. And certainly Bitcoin has shown that as this early adoption phenomenon, it does tend to attract a lot of publicity and a lot of free marketing marketing for companies. I think that's where the advantage of having something like a Lamassu vending machine in your business comes from. And I think it's going to be a big success outside of the US before it's successful in the US. It's really smart of them to name it a vending machine to see how far they can go.
With the Lamassu machine, they actually, if I understand it correctly, allow the individual franchisees or whatever, the people who own a machine can set their own fees on that particular machine. So maybe some people will try to make money off of fees. Maybe some people will just go for the foot traffic. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens to the fees. I mean, I could even imagine Bitcoin prices being subsidized in a way, like if a machine attracts a lot of foot traffic and people buy different items because they went in to use the Bitcoin vending machine, then maybe they get their Bitcoins at a discount or something like that.
I don't think you're really going to make your money up on fees because the cost of the machine is still quite high. It's going to take quite a lot of volume production for the cost of the machines themselves to drop so that the fees make sense. But the foot traffic should help in the meantime, so that will work out.
It really depends on what type of market you find yourself in. Because if we're talking about a market right now where the easiest option is to find a Satoshi Square or a local Bitcoin, or, none of those things, if it's simply not available, I still very much struggle to find people who are interested in buying or selling Bitcoin within, 30 miles of me. And I'm only an hour and a half north of San Francisco. So it's not like necessarily that's an option that everybody has accessible. So in situations like that, if there was a way that I could avoid exchanges altogether, go into, a town near me and go to an ATM, I'd pay probably 10% over some random market fee because I'd know that I would get it right then. And I'd be able to have complete control over it instead of having to go through this huge rigmarole. In a world where there are lots of ways to buy Bitcoin, then I think you're probably right. Then it's a novelty. But in the world that we live in now, at least the world that I live in, this, I think that you could make a lot of money with fees on these.
Yeah,
some people
I'm reconsidering completely my entire earlier position, and now I agree with what you said, Adam. In fact, I'm recalculating the benefit of having one of those machines. I think you're absolutely right.
There would be nothing to stop people, though, for instance, putting up an ad on local Bitcoins for a coffee shop where there is a Bitcoin ATM and saying, I'll sell it to you for 1% less than the ATM. It'll be localized, like it'll be different in different areas and different stores. That is a really interesting point, Adam. I mean, some people just don't want to deal with a person. Like they would rather deal with a machine, and they would rather know that they're going to get their Bitcoins. A machine can't like stiff you or screw you over on, on a Bitcoin deal. Right?
Well, there's more recourse. Yeah,
exactly. And if there's an issue technically with it, you can always just talk to the proprietor of whatever store it's in. And so maybe people would feel more comfortable with that, and maybe they would be willing to pay a premium for it.
Stephanie, I would agree with you on that. Absolutely. I think the issue we haven't considered is the safety issue. When I was doing local Bitcoins, one of the things I did was I put in my ad that it was for new buyers only. I offered a safe and secure environment for people to buy Bitcoins in very specific places where I would meet. As a result, I think most, if not a lot of my buyers were young females who came unaccompanied by themselves to meet me to buy Bitcoins. I have a feeling that my ad was catering to people who were worried about this being a dodgy transaction. Mm. And that safety issue is quite serious. Obviously you don't want to be going out and doing Craigslist style purchases from strangers in places that don't have a lot of people around. So I think that's another big advantage of having a vending machine, which I hadn't considered. So some people, for very, very good reasons, would be more comfortable with a machine.
But then it's kind of becomes like, why don't they just go on one of the exchanges? Well, I mean, it's difficult and arduous to set it up, but it's getting easier. And I think there are some exchanges that maybe are trying to make it easier, like Coinbase, and trying to make it more friendly to newbies and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe one of these machines would be kind of like a gateway to opening more accounts on different Bitcoin exchanges. Not really sure.
Consider for a second the underbank, though. Consider the people who don't have bank accounts or PayPal accounts or easy ways of linking one of these exchanges. I mean, if I mainly have cash from a paycheck and I just want to, buy $100 a month in Bitcoin, the leftovers from my paycheck that I only get in cash, I don't even have a bank account, then this vending machine would be perfect for me.
If it took debit cards, then it would be perfect for people who did have bank accounts or even prepaid debit cards, because a lot of people who don't have bank accounts do go with the prepaid debit card solutions that are out there too. So again, the possibilities are just endless.
I think this is not a situation that has one solution. I think that this is something that is even more local than local, because it's also based on a person's preferences. You alluded to this earlier, Andreas. Some people would prefer to deal with real people. Some people would prefer to never see a real person. Some people would prefer to sit at home on their computer and are willing to wait. Some people hate waiting and, want it fast no matter how they can get it. So really, what we're going to see is a broad swath of options that'll cover everything eventually. And the places that have fewer options, you'll have higher premiums there than places that have more options. But that higher premium is actually valuable, because it's the higher premium. It's the fact that you can make 10% off of a Bitcoin vending machine that encourages people to say, okay, well, I'll sell it to you for 9%. And then and then you start that price war that moves it down. And so everybody, except for the original guy who spent the most on the equipment and got into the market first, they can make money in that situation, but they have to do it before they attract the competition. So the incentives are really good from where I sit.
That's an excellent point. If you want to enter the market for demand for Bitcoin that exists today and make some money off that, there's really only one way to do that, and that's by opening an exchange. So this offers a completely other way of doing it with a lot less regulatory burden that allows you to really start filling the needs of this market and start making money off making Bitcoin easier to buy.
Easier is relative here, as always. And so,
Right.
It's relative compared to setting up an exchange still. And again, this is a hyper-local issue too. In California, the rules about how you need to go about setting up one of these machines and licensing and all that jazz is much different than other parts of the world. So again, you just have to check into your local regulations to see if there's an opportunity here or not.
Yeah, I think this is all why I find it amusing when people talk about Bitcoin as a perfect means for buying drugs, because quite honestly, from my experience, it's actually a lot easier to buy drugs with dollars than it is to buy Bitcoin. So
Thanks for sharing that, Andreas.
You're actually just doubling the amount of effort you have to make if you want to buy it with Bitcoin. First, you have to find someone who wants to sell you Bitcoin. Then you have to find someone who wants to sell you drugs. That's a lot of work.
So, Adam, you were saying a little earlier, if somebody can make like 10% profit by selling Bitcoins a very particular way in like a certain spot in a certain locality and from a machine, and these are the terms and conditions, this is the price, that's the market saying, we support this method of Bitcoin vending, and any competition who comes in and wants to make a similar profit is going to have to offer the Bitcoins a similar way. Like they're going to have to present a package deal that's similar to what the person who's making 10% above spot is doing too. So this kind of market for how people want to buy Bitcoins is a way to find out information about what the best ways for Bitcoin buying are. You know what I'm saying? Like it tells us something. It tells us how do people most easily want to get Bitcoins.
It tells us something about the market, certainly, but I think that it's really dangerous to confuse the feedback we get from the real market as feedback that really is instructive to us, because what we have right now is such a constrained market where it's not so much about buyer preference as simply what options will work, what options are available, and what are the downsides of every option, relative to what your particular needs are. So yes, but also no. If we had unencumbered markets, then you'd be totally right. But I just feel like you can't describe what we have now as unencumbered markets.
That's a fair point, but it also kind of reminds me of, take, for example, local Bitcoins. There are people who sell Bitcoins online on local Bitcoins so that they have a potential customer pool of people anywhere. And the different methods of selling Bitcoins online, it's really interesting. There can be a price spread between them based on how convenient they are or how much people want to utilize them. So like, for instance, some people sell Bitcoins for cash in the mail. And that's something that a lot of people maybe feel a little bit hesitant to do, like, right, just put some cash in the mail and then this person says they'll send me some Bitcoins. That could be a tough sell. So sometimes the prices on that are very low. On the other hand, people also sell Bitcoins online online on local Bitcoins for like Dwolla payment or Venmo payment or, even PayPal. And the prices are astronomical because there's a huge risk for the seller of getting closed down because all of those organizations are hostile to Bitcoins. They don't want people selling Bitcoins with their services. But yet there's a huge demand because people want to buy Bitcoins by just sending a PayPal or sending a Dwolla payment. Like, that's really convenient. So it is really interesting to me. I mean, I know we don't have a unfettered market and it's still small and we're still early in the game, but that information coming out is really interesting to me, and it shows places where there are holes in the service that's being provided to people and frankly, opportunities for entrepreneurs to fill those holes.